I'm Megan Skidmore, and welcome to the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. I'm a woman, daughter, sister, spouse, mother, life coach, and person of faith on a mission to normalize asking questions and allowing doubts on a faith journey and all aspects of life. Join me as I bring this traditionally taboo topic out of the shadows of shame and into the light. I firmly believe we normalize through more talking and engaging in discussion. More talking peels back, exposes, and erases the layers of shame associated with asking questions and allowing doubts. When we are more authentic about our journey, we are more powerful because shame has no power in the face of authenticity. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast. I'm Megan Skidmore, your host. I cannot wait to get to know, along with you all, my guests for today. This is a first. I normally do one-on-one interviews. I've done one other two-on-one, but this is my first time doing an interview with a couple. And I cannot wait to hear from you firsthand about your story. So I have Liz and Ryan with me today, and I'm going to give you all the opportunity to bring us up to speed about who you are, your background, your origin stories. Share with us whatever you feel comfortable.
Awesome. So I'm Liz Giles, pronoun she, her.
And I'm Ryan Giles, pronoun she, her as well. And we both grew up as members of the church, and then we met in college as neighbors and then just good friends, and then accidentally fell in love and
then realized we were gay.
In that order. And then over time, we kind of decided what that meant for us in terms of religion and in terms of our life path going forward. And so we got married 2.5 years ago. We've stayed as active and as participating as possible in our church communities. And
we currently live in Yakima, Washington with 2 dogs named Kevin and Casper. And we are about to begin doing foster care as well.
Awesome. So you all met in school as roommates.
Yes, at BYU, which is a religious college for our church.
Yes. So you were both born in the LDS faith, raised in the LDS faith?
My mom's side is like pioneer stock. My dad's side are converts. And same on, well, opposite on Liz's side.
Yeah. 3 of my 4 grandparents were converts to the church, and then one went back quite a ways, but we also have family that immigrated or that got baptized in Europe back in the 1800s and then immigrated to Utah. So kind of a mix of long family ties and more recent family ties to the church.
But very much, we both grew up very active and
very Mormon,
very integrated into that community. And that's, it's been a big part of both of our lives and remains a big part of both of our lives.
Just in kind of different ways than it was pre-2017-ish.
Yeah.
Gosh, so many fill in the blanks, okay?
Definitely.
So I met you on Instagram, and your name of your account is the 4th option. So I am going to go out on a limb and say, you just mentioned yourselves. We grew up very Mormon. It was and still is a big part of your lives. Can you share with us how you got from, you both served missions, correct? LDS missions?
Yes.
Which is, this podcast gets, I interview folks from all faith backgrounds. So in the LDS faith, when youth get to the age of 18 for those that are biological males and 19 for females, they have the option to go on a 2-year for men and 1.5-year mission. And so both Ryan and Liz were able to do that. Where did you each go, just out of curiosity?
I went to New Caledonia, which is down by Australia, just east.
Oh my goodness.
That was 2014 to 2016 or 2015.
Yep. Awesome.
And I was in Phoenix, Arizona in the Scottsdale mission. And I was there from 2017 to 2019. So it was actually after Ryan and I had met and accidentally fallen in love, but before I'd come to terms with my sexuality, which was really interesting because that all kind of came to a crashing halt halfway through my mission. And then I was still there for another 9 months. And, that was a very intentional choice to stay. But it definitely came with some challenges because I was closeted and was inundated with a lot of messaging that wasn't necessarily aligned with who I was or how I felt, but I also was in this very strongly spiritual, strongly religious space. So that was really interesting. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that.
Well, yeah. If you don't mind, can you share share with us your process. Share it with us what that was like. You had met Ryan in college, you went on a mission, and you were grappling with a lot of things. Can you share about that with us?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I went on my mission between my sophomore and junior years of college. And I met Ryan during my freshman year, and then we lived in the same apartment with a group of mutual friends my sophomore year. And it was near the end of that sophomore year that we developed feelings for each other and fell in love and still maintained me more than Ryan, but that I was like straight and that falling in love with her had been a fluke. And so, and I had some really frank discussions with some church leaders as I was preparing like the paperwork for that mission.
Okay.
But then I kind of just shelved that whole situation for the first 9 out of 18 months of my mission and just kind of, I essentially just tried to not think about it. And I tried to, in a way, pretend that it hadn't happened in a way, like that I hadn't had these feelings and that everything, like that I was on the eternal trajectory that I had intended to be on, because within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, they believe that you can be sealed to your family and to your spouse forever, but only if it's a man and a woman. And so for queer people, there is not an option that allows for that exaltation or for that eternal family.
So if I can just clarify for a minute, you said when you were preparing to go on a mission, you had some frank discussions with some of your leaders.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing what you mean by frank?
Yeah, so I told them very directly, like, this is the situation with Ryan and I. Well, I didn't say her name, and then saying, but I still want to serve. I want to go on a mission. I don't feel like I'm gay. I feel like this was a fluke. Like I even said that to them and got some raised eyebrows, which in hindsight, I mean, yeah. And I essentially had to go through a repentance process, even though it wasn't really something that I felt.
Involving like checking in with your bishop and your stake president and then
even though you all had not acted on it or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was interesting because so in the church, like as you're preparing to serve a mission, you start with going to your like local congregation leader, which is a bishop, and then you also do an interview with your stake president, which is kind of like a superintendent of multiple schools. And my bishop had not had any concerns or problems with what I told him, like he was ready to move it on up. But then the stake president had decided that he wanted me to spend a couple of months reflecting and repenting and then regroup after that. So that's what I did. It was tricky because I didn't inherently feel like the love I was feeling was wrong, but I also felt a lot of shame because of the way I'd grown up and the messaging that we were getting.
Right.
Because you were literally being told that you needed to repent for those feelings.
Yeah, that too.
Interesting.
So that was really conflicting because on the one hand, like this part of me, like my sexuality, even though that wasn't the word I used for it at the time, like it's to me is like a very beautiful part of who I am. And it's not something that I would want to change or have go away. But I kind of had to do some mental, spiritual gymnastics to convince myself that it had.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then I left for my mission in October of 2017.
Thank
And
you for
then-
sharing that with
Yeah.
us, Liz. I know that's very personal detail, and I appreciate you being willing to open your heart and share that. Yeah. So you left on your mission.
Mhm. Yeah, and then I just kind of shelved it for a while, as much as I could, and just tried to focus on the work I was doing. And then about halfway through my mission, it kind of came to a halt where I realized I couldn't pretend anymore that this wasn't a permanent, like, part of who I was. And so I reached a point where I had accepted that, not to a point of embracing it yet, for sure, but
Just accepting that it was a reality.
yeah, accepting the reality there. And so it was like that for a while. And then I slowly started to come out. Like I told Ryan, I told a couple of close friends back home. I even came out to a mission friend, which was a really positive experience and one that was filled with a lot of love and comfort and just relief that someone there knew. Really helped me to feel less alone.
So this was while you were in your missionary service. Okay.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I had taken a little less time, which I think it was easier for me because I was home, I was in a familiar environment. But so I didn't really have any concept of the idea that I might have been gay up until I fell in love with Liz. I just wasn't really interested in just about anybody growing up. And so it was surprising for me, but it was easier to accept, I think, because it was just sort of like I had the evidence here, you know, I had fallen in love with the girl. And so, all right, what do I do with that? You know, and so I kind of accepted that I was gay shortly, like in, I don't know, like November, I think, of 2017. But I didn't want to come out to my family yet because I didn't have answers to the questions that I knew that they were going to ask. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if I wanted to, if I wanted to try and stay single for the rest of my life and stay in the church that way. I didn't know if I would eventually want to date or get married to a woman. And so I just wasn't ready to answer any of those questions. And so I sat on that for about a year and really tried to figure out what my plan was. And so the reason we called our Instagram account the fourth option is because really for queer members of the LDS faith, there are really only three options that you're presented with. And that's either to stay single and celibate and stay in the church, or you could pursue a mixed orientation marriage, right? Like, so I'm only attracted to women, but I could try to marry a man anyway, and have that family relationship and have a relationship that maybe is also beautiful, but isn't necessarily romantic. And then the third option would be to start dating someone of my same gender or get married and then leave the church, And so those are the three options that are kind of offered to queer LDS people. And so I really tried all of them. I mean, I would pick one and I would say, I think this is the right one. And then I would pray about it and like live fully intending for that to be my path and just feel just sick to my stomach about it. And then after a few months, I would say, well, this can't be right. It doesn't feel right. So I would switch to one of the other ones out of the three and be like, well, this is what I should do. And I would pursue that and just feel sick about it. And, I'd exhausted all three of them and just felt sick about all of them. And so about 9 months after I kind of started this process, my dad gave me a back to school blessing. And in it, he told me, among other things, that I would live a unusual life, or a life uncommon, I think is what he said. And he kind of paused for a long time before he used that phrase. He didn't want to use that phrase. It reminded him of a song, and he didn't want to use it, but he did anyway because it was the words that were coming to him. After the blessing. I mean, during that blessing, I just felt it was like this brand new idea popped into my head, that I could be happy. I could date people that I loved and get married someday and still hold on to this faith tradition and still go to church and still participate. And that just had never occurred to me before. That isn't an option that we're given.
And it's not an option we see in our congregations or in our, it's not an option we see.
Yep, exactly. And
until
so
recently.
And so I mean, I was just sobbing, and my, after the blessing finished, I'm sobbing, and my parents are baffled because I haven't come out to them yet. And they have no idea. My dad literally thought it was about, I wanted to do a cross-country road trip after I graduated at the time and live in a van, and so my dad thought it was about that. And so he was baffled, and my mom was baffled, and I didn't tell them anything because I still wasn't ready. So, and then it wasn't too long after that, maybe in another 3 months. And then I came out to my parents, and things made a lot more sense for them. But that was kind of how I decided on that path. And then that was scary too, because I didn't know if I was going to find someone eventually who would be willing to do that with me, or if I was still going to kind of be on my own along that faith journey. But it felt right for the first time. I didn't feel sick about it. I felt, peaceful and calm, ready to tackle it, even though I knew it would be challenging. So
this is that's kind of,
sorry. I was just saying that was kind of my journey in parallel while Liz was on her mission. So
this is just an amazing, lovely story. Yeah. I don't even know where to go next because I just want to know so much about it. I feel so strongly about normalizing that our faith journeys are all so unique to each individual, and that having questions and allowing doubts is just a part of it. And there's no shame in that, right?
definitely.
Liz, you mentioned some of the shame that you felt when you were required to go through this repentance process. And the shame that we feel over having different experiences, different feelings, different lived realities than what we've been taught. Sometimes it's just, I'm kind of on a mission to just do away with the shame.
Definitely. I completely agree, especially because I've found that questions and doubts, for me at least, have become really beautiful in this space. Because for me, it's such a sign of really caring about something, right? Like if I don't love something and I don't care about something, then I'm not going to put the time in or the effort or the care to ask questions. I'm just going to maybe discard it, if it doesn't make sense with my life. But if I really love something, then I ask the questions. I put the work in to find the answers. And so for me, when I meet people who have questions, who have doubts, who have, fears about the gospel, to me, it shows that they really, they love the gospel, or they love God, or they love Jesus, because they're willing to take the time to really understand how that works in their lives, how God works in their lives. So, and that's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah. I would love to know, when do you remember, because obviously you had to acknowledge that these questions, that these incongruencies were there, that your lived reality was bringing up a lot of doubts, concerns, or whatever, as far as you tried to blend that with your faith of origin. Can you remember, when did you finally allow that uncertainty, finally allow give yourself permission? You know what? I'm going to trust myself. I'm going to trust what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing inside, and then eventually have that lead to a paradigm shift. You talked about it a little bit, Ryan, after your dad's blessing. So maybe if you have another one you can add to that, or Liz, if you have an experience you can think of too.
Yeah. I think the blessing was when I really let myself fully sit in that kind of cognitive dissonance and recognize that, if I was receiving basically personal revelation from God that this is what I was supposed to do, then everything else has to kind of work around that, right? That was one thing I knew, and that was what I could hold on to, and the rest of it could fall into place later. I could figure it out later. But I think I'm really lucky because my dad my parents, both of them, they really raised me with the ability to question. He brought up a lot of difficult topics. My dad did when he would, read about church history or read biographies, and he would talk about things that were difficult that I didn't realize until I was much older, that other people didn't necessarily learn about the church or about church history until much later. And we would talk about them as a family, and he was always very clear that the gospel is true, but the church is run by people, and so we're all just kind of working within that framework. And so I had a lot of practice, I guess, in having questions and, I don't know, letting those sit until I could find a comfortable answer. But
that's great.
For me, there's two really pivotal experiences that come to mind. One was at that halfway point through my mission. In the area that I was living at the time, we had this really big walk-in closet that I liked to go and shut the door and pray in while my companion would shower in the morning. And it was a time that I could really wrestle these things out and express my fears and just kind of put all of my uncertainties and my apprehensions out on the table. And I had one experience in particular where I was praying and was, crying and saying, I don't know what to believe. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to feel. And I was just come over with so much discomfort and just kind of this idea of your life is going to change and that's okay. And just trust me and we'll do this together. And so, I didn't get any specific answers to my questions at that point, but I just was able to step back and kind of just trust myself and trust God that those answers would come eventually. Mm-hmm. And then on the kind of the flip side of that experience where I did get specific answers, in March of 2020, I was supposed to be presenting at a conference in Washington, D.C. And so I flew there to do that. And then 5 hours after I got off the plane, I got a call from the professor I'd been working with for this presentation. I was a junior at BYU at the time, saying that the conference had been canceled because of this pandemic that was coming to the United States.
Yeah.
And then I was still stuck there for a week. And during that week, the world shut down, classes went on Zoom. All the Smithsonian museums closed. It was, by the time I was back in the airport a week later, it was a ghost town. Yeah. So I used that week, and I'd already been planning on using this week to really wrestle out this question of should I specifically date Ryan, because I was very much in love with her and knew that I wanted to spend my life with her, but more so the bigger question of, God, are you okay with this? Mm-hmm. The messaging I'm getting at church is that you're not, but what I'm feeling inside is that you are. And so I wanted to make sure, I guess. And so over the course of that week, I wrote this letter to God that was 35 pages long. And I just poured out every single thought that was on my heart. And by the end of that week, I had my answer. And I knew that we were supposed to be together and that God sanctioned that love and that we were gonna lead a really beautiful life. So yeah.
And I think go ahead.
No, that's just so beautiful. Go ahead, Ryan.
One thing that I kept falling back on when I was afraid that I was doing the wrong thing, or that, I don't know. I mean, there are so many people who are quick to tell us or imply that we've been deceived. Mm-hmm. That by trusting our personal revelation, we are, that we shouldn't trust our personal revelation, essentially, and that it can't actually be true revelation if it contradicts any church teachings, which isn't true. And we can get into that. Even in our doctrine, we find, in our scriptures, we find examples of people who received personal revelation that was conflicting to that of, anyway, the whole overarching law. Anyway. But one thing I kept falling back on when I was worried about that is that I actually, before I fell in love with Liz, I remember I was praying. I had some like personal habits that I was working on. And I was just praying about those, which had been ongoing for years. So it wasn't anything really terribly new, but I was just like praying about, like I need to work on this habit. I'm trying to, I keep failing. And I got this impression that was so strong. And it just said, if you keep working, if you keep trying, like in the coming, days or weeks, like you're going to be the happiest you've ever been. And it was like a week later that Liz and I fell in love, that we acknowledged our feelings for each other. And I kept coming back to that about just the unlikeliness, I guess, the coincidence almost of meeting Liz. I'm not a very outgoing person. I don't meet all that many people. And meeting Liz and falling in love with her right after I'd had this impression that I was being led to something so good and so right, just kept coming back to basically like there were so many things that I don't think could have come together without divine intervention. And I don't know, it's just knowing essentially that God, I think God brought us together, and I've had 100%. All kinds of confirmations that he wants us together, that he approves of us being together. So, that's a lot stronger than some acquaintance saying that can't be right. We know it is.
I would love to speak to also our decision to stay involved in the church as much as we're allowed and able. So Ryan had already shared her experience with the blessing and my experience in DC. And when we kind of pulled out of the at-home church COVID era back into in-person church, we were engaged. And we were really scared about going to church as an out gay couple because I'd never seen anyone do that before, and I didn't know how people would react. And I knew things that people said about gay people when we were closeted, both like publicly in lessons as well as, behind closed doors. And that was really scary, but we also felt, well, one, we just loved God and we love Jesus and we love our faith community of origin, and it's home and it's comfortable to us. But two, we also felt really drawn to continuing to occupy that space and carve out a space for ourselves so that others can see that
that we want to be there, that we, are just because we love, differently, I suppose, doesn't mean that our testimonies change or that our love for God changes. And I think we also wanted people to see that this could be an option as well. Like if younger me had been able to see people who were still happy and still loved God and also loved the way they were created to love, it would have, made a big difference in how I felt about myself. And
there would have been for me a lot less shame, a lot less wrestling, just because this option hadn't even like crossed my mind until Ryan had kind of stumbled upon it. And man, it would have been a lot easier to know that I could embrace both parts of me, because my spirituality and my faith community is really important, but also so is my sexuality and my love for Ryan. So
isn't it amazing when you can realize it doesn't have to be either or, out or in, black or white, us or them? That the word "and" is such a powerful word that you both come to. You've mentioned through personal revelation that you can do both. It's I can have my faith and practice it the best that I'm able to, and have a godly love, a sacred love that I feel has been, I think you used the word consecrated or acknowledged, is okay by the divine. Can you share a little bit about personal revelation? You both have mentioned personal experiences where you've received that for yourselves and that you were questioned. What do you respond to folks when they have questioned your personal revelation?
So I think one thing that I like to, bring up, I guess, or remember or even remind people is that our church is entirely founded on personal revelation. Like there is no restoration, there is no gospel without asking questions and without getting answers to those and having the courage to follow them. And so that's something that I like to keep in mind as well, is that the church isn't, actively, like the church isn't against personal revelation. The church is supposed to be founded around personal revelation.
Mm-hmm.
Like the 9th article of faith for our church is that we believe in all that has been revealed, all that will yet to be revealed.
Yeah. And the other thing is also that personal revelation is personal. Like if this is the personal revelation that I've received, it doesn't affect anyone else essentially other than me. And so I understand, a lot of times they feel like people who question it feel like they're doing it out of love or concern. They want to make sure that we're not being led astray, that we will still be able to find salvation or peace and happiness, because, we've been taught that there's kind of a narrow path to finding that essentially in some ways. And so in a way, I give those people a lot of grace, because it took me, a long time to learn to trust my personal revelation. And I can't expect other people who maybe haven't had experiences where they've needed to trust their personal revelation yet, where they haven't fit into the mold of the more general revelation for the church. I can't expect them to have all of the trust in that and the experience that I've had right away. And so I give them a little bit of grace, and I try and explain how I feel and how central it is to me, and give them time.
And also with some people, it doesn't matter how much time or how much we express our testimonies or our experiences. It's incongruent to them. And so with people like that, I just have to say, I don't need you to understand our revelation or our journey, but I do need you to respect it as ours, because at the end of the day, it's uniquely ours.
Yeah. And I find also that a lot of times the people who are the most concerned, who want to tell us that we've been led astray, are often people who haven't spoken to us about it. They've heard about it maybe from other people. Maybe they've even heard about it from us, but they haven't asked any follow-up questions. They've sort of created their own narrative of what that revelation was, of what our goals and our visions for the future essentially are.
And it's often a false, or at least a very incomplete narrative.
And so one thing that I try to ask when people are concerned or express concerns about our choices is I try to invite them just to talk with us instead of about us, to talk to us.
So important.
Yeah. And I've just found that really helps. I think a lot of people are reassured once they talk with us and they realize that we're just people. We're just trying to do the best we can and love God the best way we can. And I feel like that usually works, that usually helps people kind of get a new perspective. And at the very least, they leave the conversation going, well, maybe I didn't think about it in exactly that way before, even if they don't change their minds.
It at least opens the door for them to be curious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You have both leaned into feeling a lot of discomfort on this journey. And I'm sure that didn't come naturally in the beginning. Can you share what that was like for you both? And you said you were scared to go to church in the beginning as a gay couple. I'm sure there's been plenty of other things where a certain amount of fear or worry or whatever came up for you.
Mm-hmm.
What is that like? And how do you move through that?
So something that's really helped me with that is realizing that our choices don't have to be permanent. If we reach a point where the fear is too great, or the discomfort or the pain, then we don't have to stay. Like, that is a choice that we can make each day, and it's a choice where we can step away for a time and come back. We can play it out. So that helps me to know that I don't have to endure the discomfort if it becomes too much. And then the other thing is just essentially scaling it out and seeing, am I getting more joy and more wholeness from this, or am I getting more pain from it? And so far, the answer has been more joy and wholeness, despite the pain.
Amazing response. Love it.
And I think what's been really cool is that our experiences have really borne out. Like, it was really nerve-wracking the first time we went to church because we didn't have any idea what to expect. But that very first Sunday that we went to church, the Relief Society teacher pulled us aside after class. We offered a couple of comments, just not in relation to anything relating to us being queer. It was, I think, something about Jesus or missions. But the Relief Society teacher pulled us aside after class and said, "We need you here. We hope you know that we want you to keep talking. We want you to keep commenting. We need your voices." And she didn't have to do that. I mean, she knew that it was my family warden, so she knew that we were getting married in a few weeks and we were going to be moving after that. And so, she didn't need to come to us and say that necessarily, because we weren't necessarily a part of her ward permanently, but she did, and she made us feel so valued. And so, like, we weren't, I mean, this sounds overblown, but it really is a fear of ours. Like, we weren't a danger to her community, but we enriched her community by being part of it. And then she came over later. She didn't just leave it there, and that was enough. I mean, we were so grateful. But she came over later and just said, "Hey, I was still just thinking about it, and I want you to know that, like, anytime you're here, I will be in your corner. I'll advocate for you. Like, I'll make sure that you're welcome." And that was just so Christ-like, and that's something that we've continued to see time and time again. Is, there are people who are
see us as a danger or are just uncomfortable with our presence.
Mm-hmm. But there are so many people who do come to us and proactively say, "No, we want you here. We will be by your side. Like, we will advocate for you. We want you to have a space here." And so I think for me, just focusing on those people, the ones who embody love and I don't know, speak love to us, has made it really easy, not easy, I guess, but a lot
really worthwhile.
Yeah, really worthwhile to set the fears aside. And so we are still nervous. I mean, at any time, things could shift in another direction, essentially, with leadership roulette. You never know what's going to happen. But for now, I mean, the people who are loving and accepting and welcoming far outweigh the people who aren't.
Another thing that I found along with that is, in all of these different wards and spaces that we've been a part of, people kept coming to us being like, "Hey, I have a daughter," or "I have a friend," or "I have a niece," or whatever, and being that where they're in a similar situation to us and are wrestling and want to know if it's possible to occupy religious spaces while also embracing their queerness. And that happened enough times to where we realized, we need to be visible and we need to pull together this community. And that's what led us to finally create the Fourth Option account a couple of weeks ago. And we've just been amazed. We made it 2.5 weeks ago, and it's blown up so much because it really was such a need for our community or our sub community. And that's been really cool to see that need being met.
It's a space that I think we've met a few other people who are doing the same thing. And what I've thought is interesting is on almost every one of them has felt pretty alone. Like they almost feel like they're the only person doing it. And, we knew of a couple of people, but only one by name that was doing the same thing. But we're all feeling that way. There are so many people who want to embrace their faith and their sexuality, and who, I mean, we talk about cognitive dissonance, but for almost everyone I've talked to, it's only dissonant because of the, I don't know, because of the rules, I guess,
when you strip it down to just your queerness and your relationship with God, there's no not dissonance there. But when you kind of zoom out into the cultural norms and the policies and the history of mistreatment and those sort of things, you get that dissonance.
And I put a lot of work in at the beginning of this journey, trying to separate out which things were like scripturally based doctrine and which things were more cultural. And I find a lot of comfort in knowing that a lot of the things that are difficult about being queer and LDS are cultural. Like they're not scripturally based. Often they're not even really general conference talk based, like they're just cultural assumptions that we make.
Or things written for legal proceedings to create precedent.
Right. Or like handbook policies, things that are a part of our church community for sure, but are not, in my opinion, directly from the mouth of God. And so that.
And that aren't love based, which is kind of how I determine if something is of God, is like, is this rooted in and smothered in love, or is this like a fear-based or a hate-based teaching or practice, or exclusionary practice? And that's helped the dissonance to kind of settle by making my peace with things that are of man versus of God, and then just trying to do our best with what we have.
I look forward to the day when all congregations have somebody there willing to take those aside who look different from them and say, we need you here. Great job to that leader who did so. Thank you for being trailblazers in following your hearts, in following your intuition, your inner wisdom, your personal revelation, because you are paving the way for others to follow theirs, whatever that might be. You've talked about the dissonance that you have felt at times, but Liz, I think it was you who said, when it comes to my identity as queer and my relationship with God, that love for God, you don't feel any dissonance.
Not at all.
Can you both share, how has the way that you connect with God or a higher power evolved throughout your faith journey?
Yeah, I find, well, first of all, the ways that we're barred from participation has kind of forced us to connect on a different level. It's become a lot more personal and a little less institutional. But for me, I think I find that I spend a lot more of my time and my effort getting to know and understand who God actually is, and the ways that they actually speak to me and involve themselves in my life, instead of trying to please who I've been told they are. And those things aren't always incongruous. They're not always different. A lot of what we're told about God is absolutely true, but my relationship with God is a lot more personal. I feel like I understand who they are on a more individual level than I did before all of this. And it's much more rewarding.
So, no, go ahead.
I was just going to circle it back to my earlier comment about focusing on love above anything else. Because if I'm focused on loving God and loving myself and loving Ryan and loving others, I feel God in that. And I also feel like I reflect God in that. And the other way that I've connected most deeply with God in recent years is through serving others, because I really feel like I'm going about God's work and about the Savior's work. So that's really helped me. For me, some of the ways that I used to connect with God and commune with God that we're now barred from has been really difficult for me. So like before we got married, the temple was a really, really central part of my life. Like I went every week. I've found literally thousands of names in Family Search that had ordinance work to be done. It was just, that was the place where I often felt closest to divine beings. And so having to find ways to feel that without being physically in that space has been difficult, but also rewarding, as I've found that connection and that spirit in our home and in nature and in my relationships with others.
For the benefit of those listeners who are of other faiths, can you briefly explain what you mean by that work you were talking about in one of our temples. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so in our church, we have temples that are across the world, and in them we have promises that we make with God and ordinances or like sacred acts that we do. An example of an ordinance would be baptism. And in temples, we are able to do those ordinances or sacred acts for ancestors who have passed away to help allow them the choice to accept those on the other side. As you build out your family tree or do your genealogy work, you can take the names of those family members and do those ordinances on their behalf for them to be able to choose if they want to receive them or not. And that was something that I did a lot of, and it's still something I do a lot of, because you're able to submit those names for other people to do if they don't have access to records for their family lines, or if they have a long history of Mormon family that have already done a lot of that work. So it's been cool knowing that I've still gotten to participate in temple work without physically being in the temple.
Yeah. And we found a lot of peace also on temple grounds, just going and walking around temple grounds. We live a little farther from temples than we used to. And so that's a little harder now. But one thing I've really felt is that, God's presence is I think, you can feel it a little bit uniquely inside temples, but I have found that that's not the only place, obviously, that we can feel it. And so I've felt a lot of similar peace when we make intentional efforts to consecrate spaces that we're in, like Liz was saying, like the outdoors, or our home, or just basically it's almost, I found that we find that spirit more through our intention than through our physical location.
Absolutely.
I agree. You can feel God's love, presence, influence, guidance in many places. Ryan, you talked about growing up, your parents, you mentioned your dad. He was very open about just talking about the history of the church, right?
Yes.
Did not hide anything, and talked about how focused more on the gospel and its truth, and people are very imperfect and make mistakes. So having come from that type of background, that type of faith foundation, I'm sure helped to prepare you in some ways for, I think you even mentioned that. And yet I'm curious, and this question is for both, in what ways has your faith journey been different than what you expected?
Definitely. Yeah, I had a lot of practice in questioning and in sort of trusting the answers that I received, and in understanding that things could be dissonant and still have their place in truth, basically. But I also didn't really question a lot of the I just never saw myself having a problem with sort of a more traditional LDS life. You grow up, you get married to an RM, and you go to the temple and you're sealed, and
RM being a returned missionary.
Yeah, I'm sorry, a returned missionary. And yeah, that just I never really had any concerns about that. And so when I realized that wasn't going to be my path, I definitely was surprised. Basically, I didn't really anticipate having a faith journey, I think, for much of my life. And then kind of getting thrown into one and having that be ongoing for the last 7 years and probably ongoing for the rest of my life has definitely been an adjustment. But it's allowed me to really start seeing doubt and questioning as beautiful and strengthening. And one thing that I think was part of the reason I never really anticipated having much of a faith journey is because I've always felt like believing the testimony of others has been one of my spiritual gifts. Mm-hmm. Other people's testimonies have always been really strengthening to me, and I've felt a lot of peace through those. But that has shifted a lot. I think I've come to understand that believing other people's testimonies has also led me to be able to believe when people tell me their stories and how they're feeling and how their lives are different than the ideal. And so that's really the way that I believe other people's testimonies has really changed, but it's still, in my opinion, a spiritual gift. It still allows me to find the beauty in diversity of experience, instead of in conformity. And so, yeah, that's been actually a really incredible experience for me, is shifting my understanding.
Do you have anything to add to that, Liz? Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, so growing up, I was already a pretty nuanced thinker. Like I don't know, I saw a lot of unfairness in the world and wanted to make it better. And I would see that people were saying, here's like a black and white way of thinking, and I would see a lot of gray. But something that surprised me is the amount that I can hold, like the joy and the pain, the capital T truth and the nuance and all of that, like how I can hold all of those together and still make it work for me. Because I didn't see, although I saw nuance growing up, I have been surprised just how much I've been able to make space for a range of the good and the bad in my experience, and being able to like hold on to the faith despite that.
I love that. That's so empowering. Yeah, we can hold space for many things. So just a final question that I always like to ask my guests is, what does it mean to you to live beyond the shadow of doubt?
For me, I think it's realizing that doubt is not a shadow. It doesn't have to be a dark space. For me, doubt is more like a guiding light in a dark space that leads me to truth or understanding or empathy. It's more like a doorway, I guess, that opens me to new perspectives.
Love it.
In addition to what Brian said, for me, it's accepting that doubt and belief and a desire to believe can all coexist in that same space. And that doubt is not bad. Like doubt is just an invitation to wrestle and an invitation to come to a deeper understanding or a deeper love.
Yeah, that's awesome. Any other thoughts that or things you would like to share that maybe we didn't touch on?
One final thing I have. So at the end of my mission, I told my mission leader, my mission president, I came out to him and kind of just was seeking any guidance or perspective. And the thing that he said was essentially to hold on, because you don't know how the church will change in the future. And I remember 6 months, a year later, messaging him and be like, what did you mean by that? And he said, I have thought about it and I still don't know, but I felt moved to say it. But that concept has brought me a lot of hope and a lot of perspective of the church is becoming true, but the church is also led by imperfect people. But we don't know how it will change, and we hope that our presence and our service will maybe be a genesis for some ongoing change, or at least ongoing like opened hearts.
Yeah, at least some understanding.
For sure. For sure. Thank you so much for being here, for just showing up, for trusting yourselves, and for listening to your hearts. You bring a lot of hope, I know, to a lot of people. So I always throw out a few questions so that our listeners can get to know you a little more personally. These are ones that I don't tell you about. So I'm just looking for 1 or 2 word answers. I'm throwing an extra one in though for you guys, because I've been curious. And that is, how did you decide on your last name? I've just been dying to know.
I have a complicated relationship with my maiden name.
Oh, okay.
And was happy to take hers.
Fair enough. Okay, great.
This might go over the 2-word limit, but I initially thought that we would just have to scrap both of them and pick a new one from scratch. That was the only way to be fair. But she was okay with taking mine, so we left it.
Okay, share with our listeners your favorite book.
The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I was a high school English teacher, and it's a YA realistic fiction that I love.
Mine is Green Rider. It's a fantasy book. It's really good.
Very different. Green Rider and The Hate You Give. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Extrovert.
Introvert.
That's great. And who is your favorite artist?
Right now, I am really loving J. Kirk Richards.
Mhm.
But thinking more classic, I absolutely love Monet.
Classically, any impressionist, definitely, Van Gogh, you can't go wrong.
I got to interview J. Kirk Richards. His interview will air in about a month.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it was great. Are you a night owl or a morning lark?
Night owl,
Me too,
100%.
definitely.
That works out. Do you have a celebrity crush?
Brie Larson for her.
Yeah, it's true.
Probably Emma Watson for me.
Do you do still or carbonated water, or are you a diet soda fan?
Carbonated water and Dr. Pepper for me.
And still water only or Dr. Pepper. I love Dr. Pepper.
And finally, the furthest place that you've traveled.
I think the furthest for me would be New Zealand, I think is maybe farther, either that or New Caledonia, where I served my mission.
For me, it's Paris.
Amazing, amazing. I've loved getting to know you both.
Thank you for having us.
Yes. If folks wanted to reach out with questions or to connect with you, what would be the easiest way?
Our Instagram is the fourth option, and that would be the best way to connect with us.
And there's periods between the and fourth.
So the.fourth.option. Okay. I will leave that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time and for everything that you're doing and for your vulnerability and openness.
It was really our pleasure. Thank you so much.
Hopeful Spaces is a Dallas Hope Charities component of Hopeful Discussions, sponsored by Mercedes-Benz Financial Services USA. It's a free monthly parent, ally, or caregiver support group facilitated by Megan Skidmore Coaching. Email chc@dallashopecharities.org for more info. Beyond the Shadow of Doubt podcast is a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network, which is part of the Dialogue Journal found at dialoguejournal.com. Founder Eugene England was a Mormon writer, teacher, and scholar who wrote, "My faith encourages my curiosity and awe. It thrusts me out into relationship with all creation and encourages me to enter into dialogue. My hope is that this podcast is an extension of that vision." Visit meganskidmorecoaching.com to find this podcast and additional free resources, including the link for a complimentary coaching session. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram for more or to send me a DM. Help the podcast grow. Please follow, review, and share with a friend.